In light of recent events, the chances of us getting a Titanfall 3 have gone from basically zero to not zero. So I thought now would be a good time to take a serious critical look at our beloved Titanfall 2's multiplayer and why it failed to retain players despite its critical acclaim. A quick background: I'm a hobbyist game designer and lover of deep movement mechanics, so naturally I loved Titanfall. With a combined 300 hours across the campaign and the multiplayer, I've spent many an hour learning and practicing the intricacies of its mechanics. So that said, I'm going to be analyzing the game from the perspective of a hardcore player. Quick definition: hardcore in this context just means a dedicated player, as opposed to a core audience, which is the vast majority of any given game's player base. As a hardcore player, my needs and biases may be very different to yours. A lot of you will have perfectly valid objections to my thoughts in this video, and what seems like a good idea to me might sound completely insane to you. So I'm hoping we can get some interesting discussions going in the comments. The way I see it, Titanfall 2 has a couple of major flaws that, in my opinion, would have seen the game fail to live up to its potential even if the smooth brains over at EA hadn't decided to give the game the worst possible release of all time. The way the game is designed, Titanfall 2 has what the industry calls a cursed problem. That problem is best phrased as a question. In a game with a massive skill ceiling, how do we bridge the gap between casual and hardcore players? In a game like this, getting a smooth and engaging learning curve that rewards players of all skill levels is crucial. Mr. Billy, who's just sat down after his 9 to 5, needs to still feel agency when he's matched against Adderall Andy for the third time that evening. I'm going to argue that the way Titanfall 2 addresses this problem could be improved in a sequel, and propose some ways to keep the power fantasy that attracts new players without impacting the gameplay depth for those who want to seek it out. In terms of pilot v pilot, the game offers a pretty wide array of options to reduce the skill gap. Arc nades and Gravstar reduce the need to aim in gunfights, the EPG lets players focus more on movement, and the ranged and defensive options cater to people who can aim but are still getting to grips with the movement. A skilled player still has plenty of options to deal with these. The key is that a beginner can still interact meaningfully with those players, and the game's design means you can still have fun even if you spend your free time touching grass rather than drilling in aim labs. The problems with this design philosophy start to show when we introduce Titans to the mix. The power disparity between Titans and pilots is simply too great. The ease with which Titans can kill pilots means you're punished very harshly for expressing yourself with the movement system. This argument has been put forth thousands of times already, and the response is invariably some permutation of, get good, there are plenty of ways to deal with Titans as a pilot. And while that's true, those options feel antithetical to the core of the game's design. Instead of chaining slides and wall jumps, you're incentivized to move conservatively, camping rooftops and moving cover to cover. If you do press any of your noom fun buttons, it's only a matter of time till you turn a corner and get one shot by a Titan that you didn't know was there. I play Titanfall for the intricate dance of movement and gunplay. Not only do Titans nullify that playstyle, but as more of them deploy, the likelihood that you'll end up in a pilot v pilot gunfight decreases dramatically. So why don't I just play PvP? Well, that's a good question, why don't I? Titans serve a critical role in modulating the game's pacing. Pilot v pilot is great in short bursts, but the speed and intensity gets overwhelming for most players after a while. Titans occasionally slowing things down is absolutely a good thing. It's a great power fantasy, and the contrast between pilot and Titan gameplay is a core pillar of Titanfall's design. I should have to play differently with Titans on the field. They should be such a threat that I have to keep track of where they are and play around them, but that's not what Titanfall 2 does. With the speeds pilots move at, you're making about 100 positional mistakes every minute. You expose yourself to open sightlines safe in the knowledge that if another pilot takes you by surprise, you can shoot them, change trajectory, outmaneuver them, or simply run away. If they do kill you before you react, it's usually because they aimed or positioned themselves well. Nothing about that duel was fundamentally unfair. If you make one of those positioning mistakes against a Titan, you're just dead. They barely have to aim, and at most you'll deal like half a bar of damage to them. The point is that if I wanted to check every corner and play conservatively, I wouldn't be playing a game that lets me do this. So how do we fix this? Well, it's a hard one to answer. If you want to maintain the old ludonarrative harmony, Titans need to feel insanely powerful. Right now, the game delivers that power by just making it easy to kill pilots, but there are ways of having an unbalanced power dynamic without that frustration. I would reduce the effectiveness of Titan weaponry against pilots, such that they'd have to rely on abilities and positioning to win those duels. The very forgiving aim of Titans like Monarch and Ronin means they're always a moment away from killing you no matter what. Pair that with shorter ability cooldowns and a big fat nerf to Titan melee, and you'd have a much more engaging fight for everybody involved. I find Northstar to be the most engaging Titan to fight, even at her optimal range, because her slow rate of fire gives me a discrete window of time to move freely, and her projectile weapon gives me options to dodge and weave and be harder to hit. That doesn't diminish the power of her railgun, it just means there's a back and forth where you try to hit me and I try to outmaneuver you. That way the power fantasy is preserved while still incentivizing pilots to use their movement. Even though she's S tier against other Titans, her interactions with pilots feel far more fair than someone like Ronin. Now, I enjoy Ronin for the simple fact that I can call him in, get scrubs out of their Titans, and then eject. The tiny health bar means I'm not spending a ton of time just plodding around in my mech suit. He just feels really scummy against pilots, because if I find myself near the enemy spawn, that's basically a guaranteed 4 or 5 kills that I straight up didn't earn. Even if the enemy team plays perfectly, there's no way they can kill me before I kill them, unless they camp in buildings and take pot shots, which isn't fun for anyone. Even then, they have to be lucky enough to be close to cover when we engage, which becomes less likely with more skilled pilots who prefer wall runs and wide open spaces that they can slide hop in. I was watching Get Quaked On the other day, and he raised an interesting point. When people talk about Titanfall, they almost exclusively talk about how good the game's movement system is. The problem I see is that the game's auxiliary mechanics directly incentivize you not to use it. While Titan v Pilot is the most egregious example, the extremely precise gunplay and fast time to kill also incentivize players to stay relatively still during gunfights, only really using their movement to reposition. I think my most common, or at least most frustrating deaths in Titanfall goes something like this. I move around the map at breakneck speeds, just to get mowed down by someone standing almost perfectly still on a rooftop. If bullet hitboxes were bigger and time to kill was longer, I'd have time to react and meaningfully engage with my opponent, even if they still have the advantage of seeing me first. This would also be a huge boon to new players. The vast majority of gunfights are decided by who can get their crosshair on target first. A generally slower time to kill would mean more opportunities to outplay and outthink people, which would open up new design space and let players be more creative during gameplay. So we're buffing pilots and nerfing Titans. That sounds like it would benefit experienced players at the expense of everyone else. So we need to give some agency back to the proletariat. Enter negative feedback loops. Modern Warfare 2's death streaks are an implementation I think would work perfectly here. I think giving players who are on the back foot certain buffs would lean into the arcade atmosphere and address the problem of one-sided matches. For example, what about a battle royale style drop-in? So if you die a few times in a row, you can get spawned with a cloak way up in the sky, letting you scour the battlefield and set up in an advantageous position. It's all about moving away from giving players free kills and towards giving them advantages that skilled players have inherently, such as good positioning and situational awareness. My other major proposal comes in the form of objective-based gameplay. The game of course already has this, but let's do way more. Live fire and capture the flag are great because they both use their objectives to promote smart, strategic play. Flag running in CTF is a particular favorite of mine, satisfying both the honer and killer by requiring you to move effectively while the enemy team tries to shoot you down. Remember Call of Duty's uplink mode? It's basically basketball. If you're holding the ball, you can only melee and pass the ball, and you have to score in your opponent's goal. How sick would that be with everyone zipping around at 1,000,000 miles an hour? Single objective game modes encourage frantic team fights, and if that objective was constantly on the move, I think we'd see gameplay that really makes the most of Titanfall's mechanic. You'd constantly be required to reposition and move while fighting, rather than posting up on a roof somewhere or camping the enemy spawn with an eye on. So how about this? 5v5, one ball in the center. You score by passing, but the pass has to be over a pretty far distance to discourage camping. If the ball is on the ground for more than say 5 seconds, it resets back to the center. Kills still matter, but they don't directly contribute to the score, reducing the impact of Titans and gunplay in favor of movement and teamwork. That brings me to competitive play, or Titanfall's lack of it. This one can most likely be chalked up to EA again. I have no doubt the developers wanted to put robust competitive modes in, and were simply not given the time or the resources. This will be because the publisher wanted to hit that perfect release window right between Call of Duty and Battlefield, because, you know, we live in a meritocracy, and people in power are definitely there because they're smarter than you. If I were in charge, I would have argued that a competitive pipeline should be a core pillar of the game's design. You have this incredibly skill-expressive gameplay and nowhere to, express it. If you've ever watched Titanfall esports, you know how sick this game looks in a competitive environment. But in vanilla, there's simply no way to match against players of your skill level and track your progress. It seems to me that CTF is the most viable competitive game mode, and that goes back to our bit about objective-based gameplay. A balanced, competitive CTF game needs communication, map control, and distinctive roles within a team. It's honestly beautiful to watch. A great competitive mode for Titanfall needs all that, plus an incentive to move quickly. CTF also diminishes the power of Titans, because sneaking by them is a viable strategy, whereas in attrition, your only option is to kill them. If we reduced Titan health and implemented the changes I suggested earlier, then battery running could be a viable strategy. Call it Titanfall's version of jungling, a supportive role based on disrupting enemy Titans, stealing their batteries, and healing your teammates. So say we go 5v5, limit the number of Titans to 2 per team at any given time. I think you'd quickly start to see roles emerge. Something like a Legion would be your anchor tank, controlling parts of the map. Ronin could be your aggressive space taker, one pilot as your ball carrier, and one pilot to support them, and another one to play support for the Titans. Role differentiation is a key part of any competitive sport, from American football to Counter-Strike, and I feel it's something that Titanfall is severely lacking right now. Live Fire, of course, would be a phenomenal competitive game. I mean, it's arguably the game's most fun mode, and adding stakes and team balance could honestly make it one of the best competitive FPS offerings. The mode just falls flat, because you'll never get a lobby where everyone's evenly matched, so it just becomes a game of whose carry is better. No competitive means no gameplay-related meta progression, meaning there's little motivation to stick around and truly understand the game's depth. Another major problem is clarity and readability. The other working title for this section was, why the fuck are grunts and pilots so hard to distinguish? Any Overwatch or Team Fortress players will be very familiar with the idea of silhouettes, and while the pilot's outline kinda makes them visually distinct, they have a very similar profile to Spectres and grunts. Spectres even glow bright red, and in the heat of battle with explosions going off everywhere, is it really fun to have to spend mental energy deciphering what's actually a pilot? You'll see several points during my gameplay where I have to stop, turn around, or take cover because I can't tell whether I'm being shot at by an AI enemy or an actual human player, because there is literally no way to tell unless you turn around and look at them. For one, AI enemies just use normal weapons, so there is no auditory way to tell whether you're being shot at by a pilot with a vault or just a random grunt. On top of that, their damage is insane. You very regularly lose gunfights, not because you were outplayed, but because a group of grunts just happen to be there and do 70% of your health in an instant. Pilots can also hide in groups of grunts or in the smoke from their drop pods, making them extremely hard to see. And yeah, that's kinda cool, but 90% of the time it's unintentional. Contrast Titanfall's minions with League of Legends. In Titanfall, grunts diminish skill expression by adding random distractions. League's minions are designed to be a meaningful part of fights. I agree that AI needs to be in attrition and whatnot, because it's a core part of the game's identity. It's great for new players and it really adds to the atmosphere. But for the love of God, give them different sounds and don't let them chunk almost the entirety of my health bar. I'd love to see more in-depth spatial audio in general. Games like Overwatch give you tons of situational awareness using sound alone. In Titanfall, you pretty regularly get snuck up on by a 10-ton mech suit. Sounds signifying important gameplay elements and things that can kill you in one shot are often drowned out by, "They're trying to corner us!" I feel like the brief for the audio team was probably somewhere along the lines of, I want to create a battlefield that feels realistic and that feels chaotic. But in achieving that, the game ends up with a spatial audio mix that neglects to give players useful information on direction and threats. In other words, the game's sound design neglects the most important rule in game development. Gameplay comes first. In Titanfall 2, the only real way to gain situational awareness outside your immediate field of vision is by using the minimap, which requires looking away from the action on screen up to a little circle in the corner that doesn't actually give you much useful information anyway, apart from the general direction that people might be, but they move so fast that they could be anywhere at any time. Spatial audio is a great means of subconsciously feeding this information to the player, meaning they get to spend all their mental energy on consciously making gameplay decisions, rather than trying to parse the clusterfuck that's happening on screen. Weirdly, Reapers to me are the least annoying enemy AI, despite having by far the highest damage, because A, they're visually and sonically distinct, and B, they shoot projectiles which can be dodged. Is it annoying that they do so much damage to Titans? Sure. But again, because of a Titan's massive health bar, you have options and time to respond. Another problem is aesthetics over mechanics in map design. Basically, why are there so many rough surfaces? Tiny bumps and cracks on walls on certain maps just immediately halt all your momentum. I think that's part of the reason Crash Site is so hated and Glitch is so loved. But we'll talk about Crash Site more when we get onto the map design section, because goddamn I have some opinions about that map. But in short, I should never have my wall run stopped by some drain pipe or windowsill. Map design in Titanfall is another cursed problem, because maps have to be balanced between Titans and pilots with a ton of different ranges, elevations, flanks, and choke points. Do this correctly and you get Glitch or Dry Dock. Fuck it up and you get Crash Site or Complex. The main problem with the game's weaker maps are map flow and the aforementioned jaggy obstacles that halt your momentum. Both the maps I just mentioned suffer from an over-reliance on choke points and power positions, making Titans dominant and pilot fights fairly one-dimensional. Crash Site's high ground spawn not only has high ground advantage and cover, but it also has a far faster rollout to the low ground spawn by grappling out of bounds over the crashed ship. Its two-lane structure incentivizes very defensive play for both pilots and Titans. And while it contains one of the game's flashiest grapple routes, the generally jagged geometry makes wall running unreliable. The map's general lack of safe high ground also contributes to a lack of dynamism. I'd fix it by lowering the rooftop in the middle and making that a playable space, adding a high traffic flank route that's generally shielded from Titans, kinda like the central highway on Eden or the roof in Forward Base Kodai. Also make this new high ground much easier to access from the low ground spawn than the high ground spawn, adding a much needed wrinkle to a very stale first engagement. Complex is much of the same. Its power points are the dome and the middle lane by hardpoint B. Getting Titan control of these areas gives a huge advantage. Without Titans, the fact that getting to mid is so much faster than flanking means a lot of gunfights turn into turtling up in a doorway, not daring to break out into mid because you have no cover from the easily accessible high ground. The flanks could be made a lot nicer if they cleared up all the garbage on the ground near the south spawn and auditorium, which makes slide hopping through it at high speeds a nightmare. Titanfall maps need easily accessible flank routes that can be used to counter people who turtle up in hallways. In general, I think the maps that flow best are the ones that stick most closely to a 3-lane structure. Glitch flows beautifully on any game mode, both due to its symmetry and its simplicity. Dry Docks is a similar deal, a very strict 3 lanes for Titans, but passing between those lanes as a pilot is really easy, and those routes offer a lot of pilot v pilot action away from Titans, with plenty of interesting walls you can use to outplay your opponents. Most of Titanfall's spawn points are placed on the outside of the map. With only 2 of these major spawn points on Dry Dock, spawn camping can run rampant, even though the rigid spawns do contribute to its more structured gameplay. Going forward, I would give Dry Dock 2 extra spawn points, 1 for each side of the map, that are close to, but crucially out of line of sight, the major spawns. Quickfire round. I haven't seen a lot of AWOL usage in a long time. I think most players agree that it's both boring to play with and against. My proposed rework would give it a shorter cooldown and much less uptime, but also let you place it on walls or deploy it while flying through the air for a mid-air shield that inherits your momentum. I would generally make the effective range of most guns shorter. Doing this will incentivize players to go after each other rather than camping and taking pot shots from roofs. That of course doesn't apply to one-shot weapons like the Kraber, EPG, and Charge Rifle. Smart Pistol, delete it. You massively nerfed it between Titanfall 1 and 2, and it's still frustrating to play against, despite being incredibly underpowered. There is no way to design yourself out of this hole. Get rid of it. I'm all for adding as many accessibility options as possible, and the Smart Pistol is absolutely one of those. But you have to be willing to sacrifice some players for the benefit of all players. And this is an FPS game. It's fair to expect players to have to aim. Unfortunately, that does exclude some people. As for Creator Class, more abilities, more ordnance, and the ability to forego one to buff the other. This could also make Pilot v Titan way more meaningful. Different player models for different abilities is great in theory, but if you make those differences actually noticeable during gameplay, then gunfights would be more meaningful since players will know what cards their opponent can play, just not which ones they will play. Let players practice their movement in an empty map in queues, similar to how Overwatch does it. And add some in-game tutorialization for this phenomenal movement system you've created. Accessing the game's depth shouldn't rely on watching Brianato and Fizzy videos, as amazing as they are. Finally, keep the monetization the same. I know that's not actually going to happen. We will be getting Fortnite-style Battle Pass in Titanfall 3, that's a given. We live in a capitalist society where art doesn't matter. The fact that we get to have this conversation at all in the year of our Lord 2023 boggles my mind. It is a seriously good time to be a Titanfall fan. If you like the video, you can cast your vote to our YouTube algorithm overlords by clicking the buttons and writing the words. I'll be down in the comments dunking on your hot takes / participating in civil discourse. If you defend the Smart Pistol, I will use it against you in matchmaking. Goodbye.